Thanks for the nice introduction. Thank you all. It's an honor to be here before such a room full of inspired people. Let's put that on. So, as Ruben said, my name is Jullien Pannelay. I'm an international health consultant. I'm French. I live in London, and what I'm trying to do, what I'm going to try when that works, what I'm going to try and do today is share some of the lessons that I've learned along my career and try and tell you the story of how I learned it so that this is something that becomes useful to you. So anecdotes, stories, a little bit on my experience and who I am. I've got a Doctor of Pharmacy degree. I also studied business, as Ruben said. I started as a resident pharmacist in a teaching hospital. I've also worked in community pharmacies. And then after business school, I went to finance. So as a junior, I worked in a venture capital fund in asset management. I also have been an entrepreneur myself. I will tell you a little bit more about that later on. Advising SMEs on their M&A, cross-border M&A projects. I've worked for the pharma industry. I started working for the plasma manufacturer of France, and I've been a strategic consultant for pharma blue chips. And the last layer of my career is my involvement in health policy projects. So until recently, I was working at the Economist Intelligence Unit, and right now I'm working on health policy research. I focus a lot on Eastern Europe and also EU initiatives, notably around access to medicines. Why I'm here and why I'm involved in Future World is because since I was working in this venture capital fund, I kind of never stopped being involved with innovative companies, either because that was my work and that was my full-time job, or because I kept receiving messages, emails from people saying, oh, can I have your opinion? This is technical, this is pharma, this is for you. Until last year, I got an invitation to go to the launch event, and they were kind enough to make it happen just like 2 minutes away from where I live in London, so I had no other choice but come. And it's been a fantastic experience. I've been really impressed by the work that Ruben, Brigitte, Natasha do. It's beautiful. It's been also an incredibly energizing experience to spend some time with the entrepreneurs. I've been really impressed, and this is where I'm going to start. I've been impressed by how energetic and resourceful they are, and I wanted to start there because this is, as we say, I've been a consultant, so a little bit of jargon. This is a key factor of success. To be an entrepreneur, you have to be resourceful. And the little story I want to tell comes from my days as the junior in a venture capital fund. Because VC investors, the very first thing they do, and they don't even realize they do it, they might have forgotten why they do it, they run a resourcefulness test. And so as the junior, one of my weekly tasks was to go, so every week we would receive a number of investment proposals through the generic email that went investmentfund@vc.com. A number of proposals came up. The secretary would nicely print it, bind it, and it ended up on my desk. Yeah, there was a pile like this every week. And my job was to sort into two piles, the things that I would present to my boss and the stuff that would go to the bin. It sounds like a very important job, right? And a super important responsibility, because you can miss something, like you can miss the deal of the year. But actually it wasn't, because what I found out over the weeks and months was that actually even my selected pile was not of very, very much interest to my seniors. And you might think that maybe they were not looking well enough. Maybe they're a bit narrow-minded, and maybe they're only looking at investment opportunities that come from people they know, and maybe they're not going to invest in that new thing that's actually bringing something different. And this is the way actually they look at it. They think that if that entrepreneur hasn't found a way to get directly to their desk, then maybe they're not really worth looking. So It's about being resourceful. It's about finding out, scratching your head, and finding the way not to go through the generic email and the junior testing selection process, but directly to their desk. So it has to do with getting the right introduction, reaching out to whoever you know who can make that nice introduction, finding a way to impress them through meeting them in person. Anything works, but the generic route that everybody will take is telling them who have not even looked into what you have to offer, have not even looked into your product, is telling them that to start with, you're not standing out. So the resourcefulness test is really important. They want you to stand out. They want you to go further before you've even set foot into their world. The free stuff available for resourceful people is just as an expansion of that. And I think this is one of the perks of being an entrepreneur. You have little funding. You don't really have a team. But actually, by being resourceful, you can get so much. You can get free software, you can get free advice. Last week I was speaking to a company that belongs to the incubator, and they were very clear on, those consultants, of course they want to sell us something, but we are making the most of the consultants pitching their profession to us before we have to pay for it. Service providers will already give you something and you have to receive it, you have to make the most out of it. Also, there's a lot you can get without money by just being a little bit forward thinking. Think about offering your help at an event. Think about promoting someone's conference so that you can get a free pass. Lots of things that as a resourceful entrepreneur will really make a difference. Now, sometimes you're going to say, well, this is all great, but sometimes there's nothing you can do to get to the VC's desk. Sometimes you just don't have this connection. Sometimes, sometimes there's not much you can do. This is when resourcefulness becomes steadfastness. You have to carry on, you have to keep trying, and you have to insist. So one of those people who had sent an investment proposal did teach me that. So it sent this investment proposal that essentially was not in the investment scope. So a side note, if they say they don't do seed, they don't do seed. Don't bother, they will not. If the investors don't have what you have to bring in their investment horizon, deprioritize them, because chances are they will pay less attention. This is not worth your effort. If it is worth your effort, so this guy really impressed me. So he had this HPLC service business. I don't even know exactly what he was offering. But what I remember was that after a few weeks, I noticed he would call me every Tuesday afternoon. I was picking up the phone, my boss wouldn't. I was picking up the phone. He was calling me every Tuesday afternoon about the same time. He must have had a reminder. And he was calling me and I was picking up the phone, and he was very kind, and he was asking me how I was, and he was asking me whether there would be a follow-up, and my answer was always the same. Until I was like, oh my God, the guy has put so much effort, I'm gonna tell my boss. So I told my boss. And weeks went by and he kept calling, so I kept doing the same thing. I kept telling my boss. I said, yeah, you know the guy from the HPLC, he phoned again. And after maybe a couple of months, the boss said, if he calls again, give him an appointment. And he said, yeah, well, now he's earned it, so give him an appointment. And no one else would get an appointment. But this guy, he was nice enough, polite enough with me so that I would do exactly what he wanted. He put a reminder, he did it, and I say 2 months, honestly, maybe it was 4. But he got there. And he got there with patience, being polite, and resilience. And my next point is about how I became an entrepreneur. Because actually, I noticed in hindsight that I had done some of that. So it was in 2008 actually I started really. 2008, I I was in New York at the time. I was just arriving from Hong Kong. And as you might expect, the job market in 2008 in New York was not really booming. I didn't know then, but actually like employers were starting to fire people by the back door, and there were very little employment opportunities, and even less so for someone like me, a French person who had not worked in the US, who was most likely speaking English with a Chinese accent because I was coming from Hong Kong, and obviously I had a very weird accent. So I did what you guys would do. I applied to a job, nothing came out of it. So I started networking and meeting people. And from introduction to meeting to another introduction, I ended up speaking to a couple of entrepreneurs who they are 20 years older than me. They had been doing advisory for merger and acquisition for SMEs, cross-border. So one of them was French, focusing on French to US. The other was Swede, so Nordics to US. And that's what they'd been doing for 25 years. So I met them, and something happened. I felt those were people I could work with. Something really clicked. And I don't know exactly the details of what happened in the following weeks. But I remember the turning point, which was one morning. I was phoning Eric, and he picked up, as he would do. And we started a conversation, and he says, "Oh, Annie, I'm always happy to hear from you. How are you doing?" And then he was really straightforward, and he said, this is really kind of you to call, but what is it you want? And I was there. I remember I was at the time I actually had a job with in a crazy company, and I was there at my desk, and I was like, okay, this is a real question. And my answer was really straightforward. I said, "Oh, I want to work with you." So after a few weeks of continued civilized conversation, we agreed on something. I set up my own company. So I became an entrepreneur, but I had much more than I would ever have thought I could have, because I had a workspace. I was sharing offices with them in Midtown Manhattan, which was really cool. I had access to, and I didn't realize how valuable it would be, but I had access to their advice as mentors, and they would coach me into what my project be. They would help me, execute on the plan. And that was all great. And also we had a financial arrangement that I would get something out of the help I would put to support their efforts. And this was great. And those are people I still speak to, and they're still doing what they were doing at the time. They're still in New York. I gave up when I arrived here in the UK, but that's another story. But in hindsight, what is it that happened? What is it? Why is it that, because they had everything, and essentially it sounded like I was the one on the receiving end of that deal. But what I understood later on was that how they thought about it was, okay, she was able to reach out to us, not via cold call or cold email. No, she had the right introduction. And then she was able to follow up. And she was able to build that relationship. She was able to charm us and to talk us into making a deal with her. And this is exactly what their job was about. This is exactly what, because this is all about building a relationship. So they thought, hey, if she can do it with us, she will do it with our prospects. She will turn prospects into clients. She will do it again. And at the time, honestly, I didn't get that. I only found out that later on. But this is those two things: getting there in the right way and being persistent. Those were the reasons why this deal worked. I'm very happy with it. Now, once this was done, I started. I had the desk in Midtown Manhattan. I had to start finding clients, and I want to spend a bit of time today talking about that, talking about the selling, the commercial aspect of being an entrepreneur, because this is something you cannot get around to. And I want to start with my very first lesson. I'm a pharmacist. Someday in my life, I said goodbye to my colleagues in a teaching hospital. Drove to Paris because I was starting business school. the first week in business school, they had some induction program. And one of the key learnings of that week was through a simulation game that's called Ariane. I think maybe it's just that business school doing it. So Ariane is a corporate simulation game that is played in teams. So you're in teams of 4 or 5 people in a virtual competitive environment. And you compete with other teams in a business. The business was, we were selling skis. So you compete with sort of 5 teams, and you have to make decisions about your budget allocation. Do you invest in R&D? Do you invest in quality? Do you invest in marketing? And you do that in a number of rounds of decision making, and each time the system takes into account the decision the different companies have made, and then you gain market share, you make money, or you lose. If you ever have to play, there is one very simple way to win at the Ariane game. And this is by design, because this is the purpose. So the one thing to do to win is to invest all the money in marketing. All the money in marketing. Anyone who invested anything in R&D, and my team did, there was no way to win. Marketing, every single penny needs to be put in marketing. Never mind the quality, never mind the R&D. That's not important. And I think this is something, so I studied at ESSEC, which is a French business school. This is probably a bias that French people have even more than the rest of the world. If you have the best product, it will sell. Well, no, and they made a strong point, and I think they were right to do that. Now, before going a bit further, I wanted to say something about the selling versus using grants, because here we're in a university setting, and grants are a great way to start when we have something, when you're working on a technology that requires a lot of R&D. So grants are obviously an important step and an important component of starting and developing a company. But I think it's really important also to find the right time to stop relying on them and to go out and to get your own clients. And I wanted to talk about one of the companies I worked with when I was doing this M&A advisory. So that was a bioinformatics company. It had been around for a number of years. It had been funded by VCs a number of years before I got involved. But actually, at that stage, the VCs had decided that the growth prospects were too slow, so that they didn't want to carry on supporting this company. They wanted an exit because they felt it was going to be too slow. So my job was to find them buyers or partners. What I did was go to visit them and try and get a deep understanding of what they were about and where they were heading and what the potential partner or buyer would get out of an acquisition. So it involved working on a series of financial projections from like the promising one to the conservative one. And my main point here is to say, gosh, I was surprised because half of their revenues, again, they were not starting, right? They were at the stage where the VCs were tired and wanted to exit. At the time, they had, depending on the scenario, between 30 and 50% of their income coming from grants and consortium. So I can't help but think that maybe there is an association. Maybe this slow growth was happening because those people were putting a lot of their time applying for grants, executing on it, working with research consortium, which was great. It made them look great. But at the same time, they were failing to work with clients, refine their product, and tweak it so that it would become something that the client wanted to carry on paying for and buying. So this is one example, but I think this is important to think that at some stage, you've got to move forward and you've got to get out there and focus on being commercial and selling, which is very difficult because most of us are not salespeople by design, so it takes effort and sometimes it's very difficult. Which is why I had my 2 little very, very trivial tips. What you can do and things you can keep in mind when you try to sell and when you're there and you're very nervous because you're out there with your little bag and you're going to meet this potential client. This is the first time you met this person and you want to sell them something and it makes you a bit uncomfortable. So the thing you can keep in mind is that if they've accepted to meet with you, they want to do business with you. There's no way around it. It's not because they need a distraction. It's not because they want to be kind. No. They have better things to do with their lives. If they have accepted to meet you or to take to dial into a conference call to hear you talk about your proposition, it's because they want to do business with you. So keep that in mind. They have a positive opinion of you. And this leads to my next point. It goes both ways. You also have to keep a positive opinion of them. So I've been a consultant, and some of you may know that essentially the consultants get brought in to give an independent opinion, confirm an opinion that is, help get internal alignment towards a decision to be made. So when you're a consultant and you come in and you commission some research project, there are two big kind of reactions from the client. The first one is because they're the market specialists, they know their stuff. So you do your work, you do your market sizing, your expert interview, your whatever, you do all this, and you come and you present, and they go, yeah, well, thanks, but we knew that already. Or the second thing is you do all that, and you present, and they go, oh, we didn't know that. It can't be true, because if it were true, what you're saying, I would know about that. My point here is to say, as a consultant, you basically always get challenged. There's always a point in a project where things get really tough. And the way I've been coping with it, and it took me some time to realize I was even doing it, I sort of forced myself to frame the relationship as a friendship one. So I've always been talking about my friends. I've got a meeting with my friends, and the more demanding, the more difficult, and the more sometimes even stupid the clients were acting, the closer my way of talking about them would become. For some time, I thought it was to make my team feel better, because you're not going to say, we've got this call with a tricky person, because if you start with that, it frames it as this is going to be difficult and this is a challenge. So I was doing it. Originally, I thought it was for my juniors to make sure that they were not scared. But actually, I think it was for me. So I've always been talking about my friends bringing chocolates, and maybe some of them will listen to this and they will recognize themselves. You bring chocolate, you talk about your friends, how much you love them, and you're going to a tea party with them. Not a difficult meeting. Now, this has been my way of making sure I keep the relationship going with my clients on a very positive note. If that feels a bit weird to you to talk about your friends and all this love, you can always think that in most companies, all companies actually I've worked with, people talk about clients. Even those who are prospects, you don't really do business with them, but you want to. And even the suspects, the one you want to do business with, but they don't want. You will find that people talk about the client meeting. They don't talk about the prospect meeting, because they always see themselves into this already established business relationship. So once you've done that, they want to do business with you, you're friends with them, you have to talk about your value proposition. And I think what we heard earlier on was great, because we're talking about some value proposition that is well defined, and I think it's a key point, and it's a key shortfall that that's always there. We all want to have the broadest value proposition possible, because we want to keep all the opportunities open, and we want to have. So it's great to have a platform if you have a technology, but I think we need to define our company and our business as like one product, one core product. Have a value proposition that is as tightly defined as possible. So we can think about the Chinese restaurant menu with 156 items, or the high-end restaurant. How many items do they have on the list? It's a bit more It's a bit more narrow, right? And you know what they do, and you know why they do it, and you even suspect they're doing it well. So when you think about what you want to do as an entrepreneur, try and make it as tight as possible, because this is the way people will remember you and will remember what you do. And you're not going to miss any opportunity, because they will remember you. And if they want something that is close by, but not exactly what you were talking about, they will still remember you. And they will say, hey, can you stretch a little bit and do my thing, because this is really what I need. But I thought of you because it was kind of in your area. This is what's going to happen. As opposed to you saying, yeah, I can be anyone for everyone. That's not the way. You can do this very tight, narrow thing, and then they will remember you. You have to think of what sticks, and this is the way to do it. Once this is all done, just a few words. Beware of what I call credibility killers. You have been studying for a number of years. You've learned that you need to edit and read through everything you do. So it's about the typos. It's about checking your numbers. Everything needs to add up, because no one is going to invest in your project if they have a little bit of a doubt in how much work you've put into it. This is your credibility is at stake. But what I wanted to say here, also to make us all feel better about it, is that, again, it's not just on the entrepreneur end. This is something that those investors will do, and they will do it because they need to keep that ability to challenge your thing. So essentially, you are a great scientist with a great idea and trying to raise money. You're the one with the technical knowledge. How is it that you will let VCs or investors challenge what you've worked on for years, right? Well, because they keep credible. And a little anecdote about where I was working in Paris. So we had amazingly nice offices near Matignon. So very nice neighborhood in Paris. And the first time I went there, I was wowed, because the huge and nice offices were, they had a lot of antiques, and their furniture was amazing. After a few weeks working there, I realized actually there was furniture, an antique shop on the street level. And actually, we were acting as some sort of a warehouse, because they had too much. And the VCs I was working with had come up with this win-win agreement with the antique shop downstairs, so that we would store their nice painting and pieces of art, and anyone who would walk into the office would be, oh my God, those guys must know what they're talking about, because they have all those amazing pieces of art. And this is part of the show. So when you're an entrepreneur, think about, you don't need to have the paintings or everything, but think about that. That person, very intimidating, they're doing the same thing to you. They're doing that. They're keeping their credibility. So bear that in mind. You need to do the same. You need to bring your antiques, because that's how they get and keep the right to challenge you. I want to finish on a very positive note, because here we're talking about innovation, we're talking about being entrepreneurs, and about the great things about being entrepreneurs. There's many. Making the right decision. So here I wanted to talk about a company I'm invested in that has recently raised, closed their Series A funding. A little bit about the process and how impressed I have been with the CEO who was leading this funding campaign. He, originally he asked all the shareholders. It was a small group of us. He asked us whether we had any contact, any advice, and just to help him review the pitch, which we did. And then he got on with it. He contacted a number of potential investors, and actually he did wonders. So a few weeks later, he did two great things. He had actually a few offers on the table, and he needed to respond to all of them in a very short amount of time. So he summoned a shareholders meeting late at night, like from one day to the next, or maybe even same day, I don't know. But he was polite enough so that all of us actually found the time, got home at 9 p.m. that day, and dialed into his call. And he was explaining us, well, this is what they're offering, and this is why, and this is my view. And he actually listened to us. He actually took what we were saying into account to make his decision. And the second great thing he did, after actually summoning us and listening to our views, he made the right decision. And he made the decision to go for the investment proposal that was not the juicier. It was not actually the highest valuation proposed. He didn't go for that one. He went for the one that was truly the best fit, that was truly the best strategic partner for his company. And I was really impressed, because I've been working in larger organizations, and I can tell you, we all want to do the right thing, but it's really difficult. It's really difficult to look beyond the immediate sort of success, right? Because on paper, the higher valuation looks like the better success, but it's not. I think he did really well. And I think he did really well because this man is on a mission. This man has a purpose. So he's someone who's had a very successful career with blue chip in healthcare, in the healthcare world, and someone who once felt that in this country the quality of mental health services delivered was not up to the standards. This was not what he wanted for his beloved ones. So he devised a solution, and he founded his company, and this is his mission, right? So the valuation, the money, of course, he's really happy he closed his round of funding. There's no question about that. This is really important. But he was able to make the right decision because he's driven by his mission, and he's driven by the impact what he's doing is going to make on other people. And I think being an entrepreneur is very important for that, because it enables you and it forces you not to lose sight of it. If you work for a bigger company, you might lose sight of it because you have your immediate objectives, because you're kind of competing with the next team, and you will have to, the sort of life and your daily activities might take over, and you might forget why you were there in the first place, which is the one thing that drives you to make the right decision and to go to work really happy every day. So as an entrepreneur, you have the opportunity to develop your passion, and call it passion, call it mission, you will find joy, because, and I mentioned it, when I was an entrepreneur, I had to cold call hundreds of people and I didn't know them, just to find out whether or not they would want to do business with me. I would never have been able to do it if it weren't for me, to do it for someone else. No, I would never have taken the job. I did it because it was for me, because then I had defined a mission, and I wanted to help those companies that were looking for a partner but didn't quite know how to do it or didn't quite have the time. So you have this opportunity to develop your passion, to fulfill a mission and reach a goal. But before you get your innovative, disruptive product to the market and you accomplish your mission, there's another thing that can also be very important, is to share your passion. Earlier on, talking with Ruben, I spoke about my recent experience and how fulfilling it is to share your passion and to work with people who are as passionate as you are. They're not driven by money. They're as passionate as you are to reach your goal. And passion is infectious. And if people see you finding joy in what you do, this will be much more important than paying them a generous dividend. This will have much more of an effect. So before you can change the world with your amazing disruptive idea, you can change people's life, and giving them a sense of purpose is something that will make a real difference for them. And I think that's the first great thing that you can think of whenever you start a company. Yeah, I think maybe talking about that company we had in the portfolio that was doing minimally invasive surgery, so using robotic systems. At the time, it was a thing of the future. And it no longer is, but in a way it still is, because those are things that we've all seen. We've seen it advertised. We've all heard about those surgery robotics, and there are things of the future. Now, I think what's important is that before they become a real success, I think we're not quite there now, because those things still require a lot of training. Like, all surgeons are not entirely trained. It feels like this is something that's available everywhere, but actually I think there's still a few years until it's totally adopted. There was that. I was looking at, smart contactless, and this is not in healthcare, because I was not just doing healthcare, and contactless smart card did exist at the time, but I did spend a lot of my time looking at a deal on contactless smart card. You know the octopus thing, the oyster thing. Yeah, octopus is in Hong Kong. This is really mainstream, but it wasn't at the time. I didn't quite know what it was that inspired me. Originally, I thought I'd do academic research. So I started doing some internships in the labs in the university where I was studying, and found out it wasn't really for me, because it was very narrow. And I didn't quite know what I was going to find when I went to business school. I was just after something a bit faster moving. And you can see I've added layer after layer of different experiences. And I'm still doing that, and I will carry on doing that. I think I was excited by having a chance to not work on just this one very narrow topic that scientists do. And what I found, the main benefit of business school was, of course, yes, now I've learned big principles and Porter forces and strategy and accounting stuff, but actually the main benefit was through the people I met. So if you want to figure out how to access the Chinese market and you're a startup, get some help, yes, but I would go to more the independent or boutique consultancy that does just that. Back to my value proposition point, I suppose, that does just that. Because if you go to the big ones, they will figure it out for you. Maybe they knew, maybe they've explored that very narrow area that you need advice on. Maybe they've done it before, maybe they haven't. Either way, they will figure it out for you. But I think you will get much more value out of hiring someone who does just that. So try and get to that person or that sort of small group of people who are actually just doing it. Like, not go for a global-ish company. And for the US, same. Go to someone like call a company that's done just what you're trying to do before and launch their product. I mean, it takes years, right? Especially medtech in the US, it's a very long process. But go for that tiny, like one man band advisory. That's
who has the contacts and so on.
Yeah, who has done it before, rather than knock at the door of expensive consultants, because you're going to pay for. I think you will get much more value, because if it were just, you are able to do it yourself, right? Turns out you need to run your business, so you don't have the time. So look for someone like you, not the big company. Well, so I was while studying for my Doctor of Pharmacy degree, I did do some academic training that was looking a little bit more at the future. I did an extra certificate in molecular biology, so before they went on the market, I knew how to manufacture monoclonal antibodies and things like that. And I find this thing is still a very useful one now. Now it's bread and butter for a number of people. So I did a few extra things like that, but nothing that related very much to business. As I said, I just was looking for something that was a bit more fast-paced and went to business school without knowing what I was going to find there. But actually I had already added a little bit to my curriculum. And so right now in healthcare, I think it's about, it's about the cell therapy, it's about the CAR-T and dendritic cells, it's about the biomarkers, and I'm sure the University of Southampton offers that. Because those are things you need to know, and they're probably, maybe they are already fully integrated into the curriculum, but I think if you want to look at try and figure what's the future, and you're in a scientific curriculum, you have to expand in a scientific curriculum, because that's your edge, right? That's your edge, rather than try and add the business thing, for which business students will know more. Add to your own edge. I think when we're talking about, well, I'm a pharmacist by background, so if we talk about medicines, those things do not happen in parallel. For the ski simulation game, those things can happen in parallel. Pharma, you have R&D for a number of years, and then you have to do marketing. Now, I'd like to say that when I started my career, marketing was like the big thing. But things have changed a little bit. Now, market access was nascent at the time, and health economics was hardly heard of, right? NICE UK didn't exist then. I'm not that old, but NICE didn't exist. So now marketing is less about in my word of pharma. Back then it was about convincing the doctor, driving the doctor choices. Now it's more about convincing the payer. So it's changed a little bit. But yeah, those are things that happen sequentially, and I think it depends on the business you're in. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does, thank you.
And I think if you're in the pharma business, marketing is much more than just finding a nice logo and paying reps to go out after doctors. It's what it was some time back, but it no longer is. Seeing people around me develop and get passionate about what we do together. This is what brings me most joy.
Mission.
It's about my mission, but as you have found out, my mission has evolved and is changing over time. What has brought me the most joy is to see people engage or re-engage, is to see people develop around me. That's what I'm about. I'm about the people around me, because it's about people around me finding a drive to achieve something, and finding joy in learning new things and new ways to do it, and and really being driven towards the same thing as a team. Is it cheesy? A little bit, but hey.
Right, Annie, thank you so much for
Thank you.